As you know, and that's why you are here in the audience, the topic of backup has become really sensitive since cyber criminals encrypt our backups, or they try more and more to do so. The ANSI regularly publishes some recommendations before the Olympic Games. You've seen them, but I'd like to draw your attention on 5 preventive measures. And they are to examine at short term. ANSI has pointed reinforcement authentication on information systems, the increase of security supervision, establish a list of priority information systems, ensuring a system of adapted crisis management, and 5th, that's the out-of-line backup of the data of critical systems. To start with the topic of backups, let's start with immutable backups with 4 speakers. And you're going to see that they have clear-cut perspectives on the topic. I'd like to thank the 4 of you to be here with us. Wendy.
Translation, okay. Oh my God. So, alors je précise à la régie que ça ne fonctionne pas, donc on va, someone will come and we'll try to do it. Stéphane Collin. Alors.
Stéphane Collin. You have a 20-year expertise on the topic of backups, and you are a products manager for Antemeta company. Antemeta in different words. So hello, everyone. Antemeta, that's an integration company. We've been integrating infrastructure, backups, and for 15 years, we've been providing services to our customers around data protection and PRA. Clémence Philippe, I'm very happy to welcome you as well. You are a former business lawyer and you have created your company, Examine.eu, when the GDPR was applied. You manage about 50 companies as a DPO, and you're a member of the CEFSIS, Women in Cyber Security. Is that correct? Indeed. I'm the co-founder of Examine Company. We are a publisher of softwares, and we are DPO, Data Protection Officer, for about 50 customers. So we know the topic of backups, and I'm a member of CEFSIS, and you have members here, that's a Circle of Women in Cybersecurity, an association of about 500, an association of women, but it's open to men as well, so don't hesitate. It defends the position of women in cybersecurity through mentoring, conferences, training sessions, and we want to show that women have their place in cybersecurity. And we have soft skills as well. And we have a parity roundtable here. François, you are a CISO in your job, and you lead a company specialized in the protection of secrets. I'm a chairman of BECOMP. We are a company of Swiss law. We're there to protect strategic and tactical assets. And that's maybe why I'm here around the table to discuss how important a backup on sensitive protection can have. Wendy Chin.
You have an extensive background in enterprise IT and operation, such as Pfizer or Siemens, and you are the co-foundatress of a company called PureCypher.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little word concerning your company?
Hi. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I can't speak French. Oh, it's working now. But I'm speaking English right now, so I don't need to listen to myself. Really nice to be here. I started my career at Bell Labs, so I love technology. Right now, I started the company called PureCypher. We focus on building solutions to ensure data security, so to avoid data poisoning. And we're also working on solutions that we can minimize attack surface. And so at this section about immutable backup, I would like to talk a little bit more what are the solutions that will complement immutable backup.
Okay, thanks. Avant de commencer cette table ronde, j'ai une question pour vous.
Before starting the roundtable, I've got a question for you in the room, and you'll have the possibility to ask questions. Use that opportunity. You have 4 experts in the room. Who is reviewing their backup strategy? From the audience, can you wave your hand? Okay, well done. The others, well, that will be for just after, but it's really a pleasure to see that it is a topic. We're going to start the roundtable with the immutable backups as a topic of resilience within the company. Let me start with you, Stéphane. You come from the world of backups and the infra world. I'd like to know your point of view on the backups of these last 20 years, because it is indeed your topic all along your career. You've seen a tipping point in 2010. Backups became less important within the CISOs. Is that right? Indeed, when I started my career around the year 2000, one of the major points was to start implementing some backups for data. And we always had that idea of the capacity to restore, and we had the image of our luggage. And in 2010, there was the arrival of virtualization, a snapshot and that kind of thing, so that the magic of virtualization, the magic of storage made backups less important. There was a big blend between the continuity plan and PRA, so that's not that we had less work, because we still had so many solutions of backups, but we were fighting to be, I wouldn't say legitimate, but to have people understand how useful it was. We've gone a little bit backwards since then, and these last years we've been progressing, developing, proposing solutions to become totally legitimate. And that's why we are present here in the forum. And we install infrastructure, backups for our customers. But in the end, we did not deal with cybersecurity as such. We surf a little bit on the wave of cyber resilience, but we are here because we are legitimate due to our experience, an experience of situation of support to our customers, and also our ability to understand how to set up a business continuity plan. So the tipping point was there in 2010, and then we had the cloud, the magic of the public cloud that requires no protection because it is resilient. Again, a tipping point is coming, and for some time customers have told us we have native uses, the normal systems. We won't mention any public cloud provider, but they provide the resilience that is necessary. And I've never had as many projects in last years than on public cloud. So indeed, many variations and the legitimacy of the job around the backups, and there is a need to prove that our service of protection is totally relevant. And for the cloud, responsibility, data protection is first of all in the hands of the company. We should not forget that. It's a major topic. France, as a former CISO, I can imagine that you agree on the vision of the cloud as presented by Stéphane. Haven't we lost the right reflexes in terms of cyber resilience? That's a good question. We've lost good reflexes because the cloud is a promise. And so some people are saying, well, it's safe, it's resilient, I have no work anymore. Maybe we've lost that habit of being a good father to manage our assets. And I agree with Stéphane. But the challenge of backup is a bit different for us. You sell an associated service, you make sure that the promise is met, but we ask for a promise. So we all have a backup that works, and whenever there is a catastrophe, we notice that the backup was on the right one. That has happened to most of us. And we've noticed that there are two challenges around backups. It costs a lot, and the real price ESNs don't have it, because if it's too expensive, we won't sell any volume, and it's interesting to sell volume rather than storage. So we sold storage without being expert to people who were no expert either, so that the backup was not working. And second, backup is full of constraints, and it's hard. We need to check it every day, to log to every day, to test in an ongoing way, especially when the threat of crypto is really present. And if we do no check, because we believe that it's not useful, then we are in danger. All companies that had suffered from a crypto and that had an immutable backup, they left very fast. Those who had no good backup, but we thought they had one, it cost them $22 million per device. So financially, it's very expensive, and from a human point of view, it's also very difficult. So it requires a lot of rigor. You need to be trained. And our work is to know nothing in terms of technology, but be able to prescribe what is necessary. So if you are a publisher or constructor, that's often a mix of two people who know nothing, and that works well. If you put all of your eggs in the same basket, you are in danger, especially in terms of backup. And our positioning today is to encourage people to compare. And we're there to follow social engineering so that things happen well. And if you empower a subcontractor as Antemeta, you need to make sure that you understand what Antemeta does so that we are sure that the value proposition is good. Indeed, social engineering is your major topic, and we'll come back to it later on in terms of the human factor. Wendy, you have a long experience. I do get the translation? All right. So, Wendy, you have a long experience of IT and business operations in major companies, but also in startup. What's your point of view in terms of immutable backups to make sure that we have the resilience of data?
My personal view on this one really is backup is necessary, but you really need to look at your overall IT strategy. What's your business continuity plan? And from there, what is the backup strategy? The backup can be immutable, but that's just one part of it, because garbage in, garbage out. If you back up, immutable backup, bad data, which quite often we all have a lot of bad data, then you just end up spending a lot of money. And when you bring it back into the environment under certain disasters or ransomware attack, you are still backing up bad data into your environment. So I really look at immutable backup as one strategy for you to have a better continuity plan. But you also need to look at how are you going to ensure the data are good before you back it up. And so at the end of the day, really, what is your company's recovery point objective and recovery time objective? And do you have multiple locations for backup? So immutable backup is just one piece of the overall IT strategy that you need to answer.
So backups as part of a strategy. I don't think we can repeat that enough. And now, Clémence, I think from a legal point of view, it's very interesting to have that legal viewpoint, because it's very important in our business and in cybersecurity. When we talk about immutable backup and precise data, you think that that's a heresy. Now, why is that? Now, I'm going to add on with the legal viewpoint, and we're going to start with the basics as far as personal data is concerned. We've got three principles: minimization of data, and I agree with Wendy on that point. Storing data, obviously you need to do that, but you've got to know what it is. And so we're on the principle of minimizing our data, and that goes with GDPR. We've got to know what we're collecting. To know what we're collecting, we've got to know whether we really need it. And then if you say, well, maybe I might need it one day, and that's something that everybody does, not only in France, we don't like that, and the CNIL and all of the European authorities don't like that either. So let's start with the basics, and I agree with Wendy. Let's look at what we've got. We've got to have good and bad data. Do we really need to keep the bad data? And we've got to see where we're going to leave that, because if, for example, you change your managers, your information system director, etc., And if all of your data strategy isn't updated, you won't know where your data is. So you will have spent a lot of money for backups, but backups of data that include personal data and data that you don't really know where it is. So that's complicated. After that, we've got the fact of, okay, maybe I need that. There should be a duration for keeping data in accordance with the purpose. So for human resources, for contracts, for marketing. And for marketing, we've got traceability of agreement, and there is quite a lot of legislation on that point. And so we've got to look at the duration during which you've got to keep the data and who is going to delete the data at the end of that period. We discussed that this morning with Stefan. That's the second point. And then the third point in regulation concerns the transfer of data. You all know about the Cloud Act, the Data Privacy Framework, the obligations in terms of securing data transfer. And when we're talking about immutable backups, then obviously, as an ex-lawyer, I'd say no, but immutable doesn't mean perpetual. What it means is that you know where things are kept. And so with Azure, the big American companies, the big servers are in Europe, they're in the United States. If you're an international group located in Asia, South America, where is all your data? If you've got a policy whereby you back up your data, you can save data in lots of different countries. If, for example, you're in Michelin and you make tires in China, you're not going to back up all of your data in France, you're going to do it in China. And if you make tires in the US, then you're going to back up your data in the US. But that means that you've got backups worldwide, and you've got to know, A, where the data flows come from, B, what the data is exactly, and C, how you're going to secure all of these data transfers legally. And so I'm going to add a fourth point, so this is another layer. You're going to love me here. We're also talking about the quality of data, and I work on personal data. That's my job, where you have to take into account cybersecurity, backups, the fact that you've got data and you know exactly where it is, but you've also got to know about the quality of the data, because we've both got the question of controls, which isn't that important in comparison to ransomware and cybersecurity. And then, as we like to do in our normal lives, we've got to have good rules of hygiene. The cleaner your system is, then the bigger the value of your company afterwards. Now, Stefan, earlier on when we were talking about that question, you said to me, yes, but you've got to think of that idea of structured and non-structured data. Yeah, we tend to always want to put everything in the same basket and deal with it in the same way. And it suits us, doesn't it? We say, okay, let's have a broad protection system for our data, and it enables us to sell more services, and from a business point of view, it's good, but I think it would be interesting to try and look at the level of responsibility and put it at the right place. Now, just to define structured data, that's what you'll have in your file servers, for example. And we've realized that it's those file servers that are a threat, and you'll have a huge quantity of information which has nothing to do with Office or your family photos, but you can find financial exchange platforms, you can find discussions between different environments. Very often you see really old AS400, which exchanges with new platforms in different environments. And so non-structured data, to the contrary of what you would imagine, we're able to analyze it and do something with it just with very IT-focused mechanisms. But then with structured data, we need to be able to talk to that data, whether it be in a database, in an application, an environment, X or Y. And that's the subject of the discussion we had earlier on. So how can we create this classification with a situation which is more empirical, whereby we have an analysis so that we can apply the right protection models, the right structuring models, and level of knowledge, because you were talking about the different legislation. We can find ourselves with needs in America which have nothing to do with the needs in Germany or France. And so we've got technical tools that can help us to do that type of thing. The quality of the information, as you said earlier on, is almost utopic, isn't it? Unfortunately, that's the situation. And so I can understand the point of view whereby we say, yes, we really need to have a rule, we really have to have a structure. with a guarantee to say that certain data shouldn't be kept, certain data shouldn't be kept in an immutable way, but then we should have that life cycle, which isn't that easy to put into place or identify. We've got the technical structure, but at the end of the day, we're just a tool, and that's what you said earlier on as well. And so we've got to be able to prove, and our objective is to give top quality with regards to the probability of what we've done and what we've implemented, whether it be for the immutability, it's up to you to find your own definition. We'll come back to that because you were talking about definitions. We had a debate on that in cybersecurity, the semantics are important. Now I'm going to give you the definition. It's a file which cannot be modified or changed. The aim of the backup is to be unalterable and to be able to be rolled out on the production servers in the event of a ransomware attack or any other loss of data. So we've got the term immutable and other terms that you would prefer to use, maybe? Clémence. No, I quite like that, but then there is a false friend, which is the perpetual backup, and for us that's just not possible. That's what Wendy was saying as well, and that's our position, because we know that when you have a backup of data, then you can very quickly retrieve it, and I agree with you. In the case of a ransomware and a notification of a ransom, it's very rare that the companies are able to put the information system back to the situation it was in just before the ransomware. So I really agree with you on that subject. I don't agree with you. Sorry, I don't agree with you. I've got a headache. I'm saying to myself, gosh, this is so complicated, even if we do the same job with the same aim. But when I listen to Clémence, you just want to leave the backup project for tomorrow because due to regulations, you think, what am I going to be able to put in my basket? What should I keep? What should I put in the bin? What's tactical, strategic for me? And with the legislation, we can never define that. So it's complicated. I'm going to try and be pragmatic because when you're in IT, you're a bit lazy, want things that work quick and well. Now, I know Clémence has got problems in her job, and so I would suggest you look at the DPE so that you can define your strategy so you don't put all your eggs in the same basket, and you should keep all of the sensitive data, health, nominative data, etc., where it should be, because the sanctions are so costly that it can be dissuasive, and it's important to do it now, and it's also a point of sovereignty, I think, which is very important in that approach. Our position consists in saying, okay, we're going to guarantee resilience, and immutability is important for us because data shouldn't be compromised. If it's compromised, it's altered. And if we want to have the certainty that it hasn't been altered, it should be in a system which delivers an immutable function. And we're in 2024, and there aren't that many solutions around. Every year we carry out tests with lots of backup leaders and producers, and we try and be pragmatic. I'm not saying I'm going to go for the best one, but we're going to try and find what works, and which, in terms of social engineering, is suitable for an SME, a small company that will have the resources and that can understand the changes with this type of system. And then we've got the big publishers, we all know, Veeam, and then we've got Oxyperks, and then we've got groups like Cobalt, etc. And we've got big producers as well, like LCME, with Snap, etc. But if we look at all of our systems today, I can talk about the brands, I've got no problems with that, but we have got to question the functionality and what's going to happen with all of the elements. I'm going to try and be succinct, but it could take me an hour. Now, Stéphane said, well, we operate with a backup function. We've got to give the guarantee to our customer that that information that's in the system and that's going to be switched to immutable backup has got to be integral because it's tactical and strategic information. That means it's worth money, and it would really put the reputation in danger for the company. And for Clémence, if you've got a legal thing, you've got to deal with her. We all have our own problems, but you understand that we can't work without the legal side if we want to do things well. And so it's a little bit more complex than you would imagine. It means we've got to put a bit more money in the project analysis so that we can have an external analysis, because if you do it without objectivity, you will die and you'll make the worst choice. So our position today is to take agnostic stakeholders. We know that in crisis, management exercises. We can get companies rolling again after 48 hours. We won't take 50 days if we only need 2, because customers are in an architectural position which can be offered by people like INCYBER or like Vote or Hexagreen and their systems that work quite well. But it does mean you have to be trained with the solutions, whether you've got them with where you work or not. So take complex software that can have you structured or non-structured data. But if the operator internally hasn't been trained, hasn't been paid for 10 days over a quarter, so that they know how all of this should be operated, so they can create governance as it should be. And, obviously, you will all love this. If we say, okay, you can't just back up anything, the carbon footprint's terrible, etc. Let's be pragmatic in the approach. The aim is that if something happens, we should be able to start again. Clémence has got to guarantee that you don't actually get fined because of the regulation. And Stéphane, you've got to guarantee that that promise is kept. Now, Wendy, do you want to react to that? Because about this term, what would you say?
Well, actually, I want to react to what they are saying instead of just the terms. To me, we are here talking about backup because we have a problem. And most likely, our company are big enough. If you're a small company, you don't have the budget to even think about immutable backup, period. So it's a larger company. And if you're a large company, you need to think like a CTO. You need to look at your environment. What environment, or I'm sure your environment have all kind of technology. I was talking to a CIO not too long ago. They are still backing up to tape. And they use physical building to store the tapes. Is that immutable? Well, I'm pretty sure it's immutable because you cannot access it to touch it, right? Is that cheaper? Depends. Depends on what kind of technology you're comparing. So to me, all of you are right. You need to look at what data are most critical. So you need to make sure it can be backed up and bring back in turn there's a cybersecurity attack. Sorry, yes, thank you. That is very important. Understand your own operating environment so you can back up in a way that you can bring it back in. Have a business continuity strategy in place so you know what kind of recovery time objective and recovery point objective. They are very different things. Recovery point allow you to look at how many months ago, how many years ago of backup is when I want to bring it back in. And you don't want to back up all the unnecessary data, obviously. And so understanding your data is important because you want to make sure you are compliant to the government regulation. If you're in a business doing advertising and you collect personal data, you need to make sure you don't back up personal data for years and years. And so you need to have a retention policy in place. So these are the things that you need to really look at in terms of how do you back up your environment, because the key about backup is so you can bring it back in case of the problem. The backup is not itself, oh, I backed it up, so everything's okay now. The backup is in case something happened to your current operating environment, you can bring it back in and you can get back to business very fast. And so all of us are correct in some sense, but I think you need to look at your individual company, individual needs, and take what we are saying to come up with a strategy that works for you and your budget.
Ça, c'est le pragmatisme à l'américaine.
That's American pragmatism there for you. Now, having been around the table and had your opinions, let's now look at the main subject of this meeting, which is what's brought this big audience. How can we secure these backups? Now, Stéphane, the subject is just the beginning of a whole process. Don't you think it's the whole information system that should be worked on? Because when we talk about having a sanctuary, I think it's very important for this subject. Yes, now we do use stronger and stronger terms, don't you? And, that's good with regards to the different needs. And now we defined this with a term which enables us to guarantee that we have separated the scope of responsibility. Now, we're talking about being pragmatic, and I think that's very important because we have got so many things that surround us, that we've got to put a little bit of people in the center of this. We've got to guarantee that people have put into place an organization which will enable them to separate the perimeters of responsibility. If you've got someone who, for example, has got the keys to the truck, the IT truck, and is able to delete data, have delete backups, even if there's an immutability, we know that there are people who can go that step forward. And what's interesting in this separation of scope is that not everybody should have all of the rights and all of the capabilities. Now, we believe in the service manager model, so you give to a third party the services for backup rather than having control of the whole system, and that's the type of thing that we would recommend. But within a company, whatever the size, this separation model is already a very good start. Now, it doesn't mean that afterwards we shouldn't use all these technologies. We mentioned lots of products, whatever they may be today. We could talk about Veritas, all of these players today who have put on the table technological resources and means, and who today have become obligations. It's up to them to give us a solution. You were talking about immutability, that's compulsory. You were talking about encryption, that's compulsory. You would talk about separating the scope of responsibility. Why should you work as an administrator all the time? It's almost as if systematically you were the master of all actions. Well, no, you've got to separate the scope of responsibility, and the operator and administrator should be separate. Now, to say that the whole information system should be sanctuarized, yes, why not? It's something we've started. Now, you've probably seen all of the different fortress technologies, yes, which have come back to fashion. Yeah, it's part of the changes, and let's go back to simple foundations. Let's define the perimeter of responsibility. Let's make sure that the backup infrastructure isn't exposed as it was in the past. More and more, we're talking about putting the backup infrastructure in bubbles. So a sort of trusting heart, if you like, so that in the future, if there's a human error, because very often an incident isn't only a cyber attack, it could be a human error, we've got to guarantee that this human error won't spread, or if there's a cyber attack or a mad friend even. Yes, you mustn't forget the internal threat, because it's something we hear more and more. Yes, obviously. And so I think that we've got to be pragmatic, as you said. We've got to have the right resources and means. But let's trust the publishers, the manufacturers, to give us the type of solution we need. Not blindly, but let's implement the right technology in the right place. And I don't think that today there are any bad players in this type of service. But, yes, you need skills. Yes, you need to have a good hygiene in terms of security, and that could mean that you need service contracts, but also best practices within the company. Wendy, what is your opinion? We heard somebody saying that you had American pragmatism, but what do you think about sanctuarization of these backups?
With AI, it's really getting scarier and scarier because it can do anything. It can do all good, it can do bad. So I would agree. If you can, I actually even think the way we compute need to change. We went from mainframe environment to a distributed environment. Access is everywhere, so you can access any little points, and then you can insert viruses and insert any bad things, and it can propagate to the downstream points, right? So if you actually containerize, like what Stefan was saying, put a bubble. Is that what you mean by centralized? I'm assuming, right? Put a bubble within a backup capability, then you can at least, whether that's immutable or not. Well, when you put a bubble in there, it's generally immutable, but it's not the kind of immutable technology we're talking about, I think. So if you do something like that, it will be a lot safer. So I believe the operation will change. You will have containerized type of computing that's safe. That could be able to give you secure transaction with a lot less access point, which that including backup.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Wendy. Now, France, you benchmarked 25 backup architectures. What did you use? Did you find the best recipe, and what works at the moment, obviously, from an objective point of view? Now, are there any publishers here for backup in the room? If you'd like to leave the room, maybe, because you won't like what I'm going to say. No. Well, let's talk about the success stories, maybe, the right recipes. Now, I think we've got to be pragmatic. You know, if it's pragmatic, it's not going to be expensive. If it's complicated, then you need resources. So I think that being pragmatic is an objective that we should all have. Then if you try and force it on the legal advisor, that's another problem. Now, in our lab, as we used to be operators and we know what our customers experience with solutions, we have two parameters. The first one, is it simple to operate? When we've got a typical backup and we've got a backup model, we try and apply it and we use it. And we use most of the big solutions, Vim, Oxybox. We try everyone. And then the main standards are tested, and then there's hardware as well. Hardware for us is important because that's what's going to add the technology for encryption, because that's not in the backup solution for immutable backups in any case. And then the manufacturer will give us guarantees, because our customers have a lot of health data, diagnosis data that has to be kept 20 years. And so when you make a blood test, for example, in a laboratory, you have to keep it for 20 years in France. And so this type of information, there are very few manufacturers who can guarantee operational maintenance for 20 years for a technology, because that requires huge costs and resources. And so the last one that we saw with a real change in technology and the simplicity of use is the American Exagrid, and you know that we aren't very attached to Americans because of sovereignty issues, but as an editor, publisher, the most effective is Commvault, but it wasn't easier. And expensive as well, Commvault. So it's a huge machine that a small company can't afford to buy. But whatever it may be, whatever the solution is, even with Oxybox, which is a French product which works well for SMEs, it requires governance. And so it really does require training and mastery. It's not complicated, but you've got to learn how to use it. And that time, nobody ever takes it. Now, out of 250 big European companies, 80 had a leak or an encryption problem over the last year. Now, 100% of the administrators hadn't received the information of about the firewall that they were in charge of. And we've got about the same percentage in terms of backup. Most people are only trained on their capital experience, so there is intellectual poverty in terms of the training that's provided, because people provide you with almost like a major aircraft. If you pilot a firewall, you know there are 85,000 rules to learn. The manual is more complicated than learning to fly a Boeing 737. So I don't think, unless somebody's been doing it for 30 years in this room, I don't think anybody's capable. And so resilience, if it's technological, at the end of the day, because for most of the backups, they are encrypted, and we look and see what happens in the server. And if you put everything in, if you look at Vim, for example, you've got a false bot that's walking around, and you can see that there are problems but in truth, there are false bots that are so well written that they can't be identified. Now, today, more resilient, Exagrid is the only one that the false bot didn't get through. But that's the one that seems to be working well. You can put any software in it and it will more or less exist. But I'd like to repeat that it's training. You've got to invest in training, and companies don't want to invest in tech because tech changes. If we train people, then they'll leave, they'll go elsewhere because they're certified. It's very complicated, especially in France. It's not the case in Switzerland, Germany. Somebody who's technical, trained by their company, they stay with their company. In France, somebody is trained and then will go and try and earn more with the competition. And so it's a mindset, really. I can't let you say that. That's not very nice, is it? Okay, so pragmatic, make sure that people are involved without putting all of our technologies under the wing of only one publisher. You know, being pragmatic's one thing, but otherwise you should call upon Altimeter, who'll do the job for you. It won't cost much more, I don't think. Maybe we should talk about that. But more seriously, if it's too complicated, delegate to professionals, and you keep the expertise, for example, and Clémence can confirm this. If you are there to process, then you have the full responsibility of the data, so don't give your data to an external service provider if you don't know who they are. Be very careful with that, and you know, it's very important in do your due diligence, but Clémence could explain that. Now, in terms of support, Clémence, when you are faced with the risk of encrypting these backups, how do you deal with this in terms of managing the security procedure, and how do you draft the documents, the PCRs? So this is a French document, the security document, because you help a lot of corporate information service officers. Well, yeah, I have an advantage over my friends, is that I only understand about a third of the words that you're saying. I'm a lawyer, and I was a lawyer because I was rubbish at maths, so I don't really understand what you're talking about. Now, for me, we work with lots of big associations, corporations who don't necessarily understand what you're talking about. That's why we work with them, because that way they give the right solution. And our aim is to say, okay, we've got human beings in front of us, and I think 85% after lockdown was the figure that we had in terms of human faults. So we have training with regards to GDPR, cybersecurity. The other day we had a phishing test with a company that sells perfume. 30% of the women fell into the trap, and people are important. You know, I can say that because I'm a girl. It's not sexist. Now, I'm going to take a position of a small or medium-sized company, not key accounts. So we write, we're lawyers, we're there to write procedures. And so we help companies to create ISO security plans and activity plans and quality insurance plans for their security systems. Why? Well, because, as you were saying earlier on, with developers and in IT, everything is very expensive, and people are worth money as well. And so they're quite volatile, and that's the market. And so when you write something, there's a form of memory, something that stays. We like to have traceability over time. We like to see what's happened over time. We want a company to last over time. And in order to do that, you have to write everything down. So if someone leaves, it's written down, you know, everything that he did was written down, and the procedure's there for the next person who comes along. And so for ransomware, if your information system is blocked, then you can't go and have a look at it. So the advantage of writing things down and printing them, it's not good for trees, is that you can restore what you had thanks to paper. It's stupid, but in companies, when you've got all of these policies, I would invite you to print them, because the day when you need them, then at least you can get them out of a file. And so we like to have proof. We've also got some great questionnaires that come under, you know, in our plans for data security. And we're going to have more and more in the future. And the fact that we've written things down proves that we have a certain methodology, and it's a proof of good hygiene, of best practices. And if I come back to the whistleblowers, be careful with whistleblowers. We have got whistleblowers, and we have got a law from 2022 in France about whistleblowers. And so we're not just talking about commercial corruption. And so this is what you were saying. If you don't separate your data, if you let everyone have access to everything, then when we're talking about the general good, if somebody comes along and blows the whistle, and if there's an internal threat, and this is what we see on a daily basis, that threat is there. And the threat isn't necessarily from outside the company, it could be internal as well. Now, without trying to make you paranoid or anything. So as far as risk management is concerned, as far as the pragmatic side is concerned, I'm a pragmatic legal advisor. My job is to manage risks, but I don't make the final decisions. I'm not allowed to, and so that's up to my customers to do. They make the final decision, but I've got to come along with solutions, and sometimes they're technical solutions, sometimes they're pragmatic, and sometimes they're legal. But if we only base what we're saying on what the legal advisor said, then it's a bad start. We have to work with everyone, all the different business sectors, and everybody's got to like each other, because very often in companies it's not the case. It's important that everybody works together. There's real team cohesion, and I agree with you in terms of training. If we don't train people, if we try and onboard people and they find themselves on their own, it just can't work. You've really got to train people, and the more you train people, then the more you protect your company against internal and external attacks. Okay, now time is going so quickly. I just wanted to have an estimate of the number of questions. Can you raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question? As they're quite chatty, I'd like to manage the time properly. Are you going to have any questions? No, but it's a subject that they're not interested in. Yeah, the room and the audience is full here. Okay, if you raised your hands. Stefan. Now, forensics that you wanted to talk about earlier on with regards to backups. Yes, we're going to deal with it from a different standpoint. Very often we have very big expectations with regards to backups. We've seen so many solutions which try and provide a solution which is cross-cutting, cross-departmental, very broad, which guarantees that we will give you back information that is clean and ready to use, which in itself is the maximum expectation that you could have. There are other visions which say, okay, we've got a volume of data, servers, information, we'll give it back to you in a state whereby it hasn't been corrupted and it's not unclean. So we'll go back in time. And the reality is that we don't do that. We try and lose as little data as possible. And when there is a major attack, whatever it may be during a crisis situation, we don't believe in the model which says we're going to give you data, retrieve data which has been cleaned. What we try and do is ensure that the backup tools stay in the right place, even if we can see anti-ransomware, we can see lots of different collections and lots of different cyber solutions. At the end of the day, that's not what we're asked to do. During these actions, if in the future there's a cyber attack, we try to position ourselves as an efficient tool that can retrieve and restore data. That's an important point, to restore the information that's needed, the capability to make available as quickly as possible different versions of the information, because the information that we found at 1720 isn't interesting. If you want to retrieve the full scope, it's maybe what was available at 1710 or 1630. And that's where we can position the technology. The technology will bring us things that are extraordinary. We're talking about counter-user protection, which means what it means. So it means today we are able to protect the information continually, but also we can have a journal which will enable us to take the information at the right time and put it in the right place. And during these reconstruction periods, we need to have efficient tools, and that's where we want to position ourselves. We want to be effective, fast, and we want to guarantee the information that we can retrieve, which can be cleaned afterwards, because systematically we'll inject a script and tools to clean the information so that we can get a minimum loss. And I think that that's an extremely important point. We don't want to mix up all of the subjects in the tools. There are some very effective ones on the market, but in reality, whatever the tool may be, I'm not asked do people really want a backup that will guarantee against the ransomware risks? Now, I'm talking about being pragmatic, and we will have said this word a lot. I think it's the key word. We realize that let's use the tools that we have and use them for what they were designed for. And let's not try and wait for the miraculous tool or a miracle tool with the best consultant in the world. Let's leave the right people in the right place.
There is a correlation of information. Backup is something, and forensics is your legacy, your past. If you don't know where you're from, you don't know where you are going to. And that works as well in information systems. A company that has a difficulty resumes very well when the whole legacy is available, when you can replay the whole activity, when you know which minute, which day the hacker has been there and started compromising the data system. So you can resume from that minute, from that day. And for that, the logs of your firewalls, of your activity on the AD on the annuary have to be perfectly tackled. And little tip, they should not be put in the system backup, they should be put elsewhere, because if they are not available, we can use the data without the information system, rebuild the story, tell you how to resume, tell you what signature you had, or what kind of phishing or whatever, and where the compromise comes from. Because if you resume without knowing that it's a false bot, then in the next minute the hacker is still there. Yeah, that's really major. And the log legacy is part of the data. It's no data business, it's resilience data and security data. And then you need to check with the colleagues from the other departments about the restoration time, because there will be some forensics. Wendy, a reaction on that?
Actually, I think I would agree with Stefan. You will have to separate the role. Backup, the purpose of backup, you need to clearly define. Is it bringing back the data as you can operate right away? If that's the case, you need to, and you are subject to a cyber attack, then you need to know at what point the cyber attack started. Then you can bring back before that happened. Is that immutable backup? Not necessarily. You just have to have a really good backup to tape. That's okay too, right? You know it hasn't been tampered with, so you can bring it back in. So the backup strategy really is just what exactly are you trying to back up? That is the most important. And the panel says immutable backup, the ultimate solution, and I would think that's not true. It's one solution. That's my opinion.
Merci Wendy. Alors, vu le
Thank you, Wendy. Due to the number of questions ahead, I'm going to ask you a last word, a conclusion word, maybe a piece of advice, a vision, a reminder on the strategy to adopt in terms of backup. Wendy, can we start with you?
As I said earlier, the strategy for backup is understand your data, the most important data, not just all data, and understand your retention policy, which is regulation. Certain financial require to be backed up for good, for 7 years or 10 years. Certain personal information you can only back up or you can only keep for so many years. So once you have those understanding, then you can come up and based on your budget and what's available tools. And of course, personal thing we mentioned, right? Training. The problem with IT is everybody give you a solution and they all require you to learn how to use it, which is horrible. We should really make sure the vendor who provides solutions give you one operating menu that has everything, which Cisco has a lot of storage. So anyway, that's a separate. So basically what you really want to do is understand your data, the most important data, understand the retention policy, understand your budget, and then figure out what to back up. Immutable backup may be okay, but for a certain period of time, and it's very expensive, and it costs a lot of storage. So you really need to decide if you want to use it that way, at what point you want to stop backing it up into that.
Et pour comprendre ces données,
and to understand the data that we're going to safeguard, we need to work with the other departments of the business to know about the critical data. And it's sometimes complicated to have people understand that not everything is critical. Frank, I don't agree with Wendy so much. For me, the solution in cyber goes towards immutable backup, even if it costs a lot. But though the costs have been divided by 10, there is a strong inflation on these systems. If I had a major word to say, that's come and see me, and we're going to direct you towards people who can do that very well, operational people, and simply don't follow the marketing perspective of editors and constructors who tell you we have the best of the worlds. Don't believe them. They are liars. These are marketing people, and they don't know what a backup is all about. It can't work. So we need you to get some outside advice, to listen to experts, not necessarily your SN, maybe others, but take a real architect of data backup. If you are small or big, data is the value of your company. Without data, there is no company. So it's worthwhile to invest in it. And from a regulatory point of view, it is relevant and it is long-lasting. Okay, so be pragmatic, be human, give support, assistance. Yeah, you also need to be intelligent. That's not simply moving data from one part to another one. While people think about that, some company leaders were doing that at the crypto left on the NPC. They call it backup, but it's no backup. It's duplication. It's no resilience, no availability. It's nothing. It has no interest. It's even dangerous. If it's mobile, it can be stolen. And backup goes way back. So you need some clever assistance, indeed, and especially coming from the outside that will give you visibility on what you want to do. Clémence, over to you. I would repeat the word traceability. Once you know where your data is, what you have in your backup, it's already a very good point, because that way you have a continuity through time. I think that's really important to know what you have. Same thing at home. It's important to know what you have in your house. It's essential to have a traceability through time. And that's also what gives trust, what allows you to think, I know what I have at home, I'm protected, I'm well protected. If I don't know what I have at home, if I don't know if some doors are open or closed, then you'll find yourself in a mouse trap and it can't work. So my last word would be awareness, resilience, and traceability mostly. Stéphane? Last word, maybe? It's difficult. I'm the last. They have said it all. No, we like to repeat a triptych, a tripod of a backup. We've talked a lot about tapes, and it's good to hear that tapes are not dead. They're not just disks. And in that tripod, we have the willingness to state that we have analyzed, understood what we wanted to protect, make sure that our environments are safe, and guarantee. That means checking the quality of the services we provide. And systematically, we need to apply to it all a simple directive that is adjusting all along. We'll have some daily issues, some difficulties during the activity resuming time, but we have to adapt our policy. So it's just a good cycle, virtuous loop. We can call it matrix of data protection. We call it the weather of protection, and it needs to be of high quality. And it's not because the quality is good today that it will be good tomorrow. So we need to adjust, adapt, and we have to keep that in mind. We need to adapt to the daily changes. I'd like to thank the four of you. You have respected the given time. A round of applause for you.